Hello there, faithful listener. You've tuned in to Season 7 of the Bible Explained podcast. So make sure to grab your cup of coffee, because today we are going to be discussing the book of 1 Corinthians. Hey, faithful listeners, welcome to the second to last episode of Season 7. Hope you all have been having a really wonderful week so far. The weather has been just absolutely fantastic. Probably the most beautiful weather of any place on earth. Where I am living this past week, it has been like in the 60s. So it's kind of cool. I have my windows open. It's just really, really wonderfully nice outside. And the sun is shining and it just smells so good. It's beginning to smell just ever so slightly like fall. Just ever so slightly. So I'm enjoying the wonderful weather and the beginning of the smell of fall as the weather begins to change in my area, though I will definitely miss summer. So here's the question for you today, and make sure to contact me and tell me what your answer is. Are you somebody who enjoys pumpkin spice lattes before they're even available? Like you just love pumpkin spice lattes, you just want to drink them all year long. I will say that if you do, you're wrong. Pumpkin spice lattes are not good. In fact, most pumpkin flavored things, in my opinion, are not good. I am not a fan of the pumpkin flavor. However, I do really enjoy pumpkin rolls, and I look forward to them. You know, the things with like the cream cheese inside. I look forward to those every single fall. I like those, but I don't like anything else pumpkin flavored. It's overrated. It's a disgusting flavor. Okay, guys, let's read 1 Corinthians 2, 1 through 9 today. We're going to be talking about Satan today, so this is going to be an interesting episode. I'll be reading, as always, from the WEB. When I came to you, brothers, I didn't come with excellence of speech or of wisdom, proclaiming to you the testimony of God. For I determined not to know anything among you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. I was with you in weakness, in fear, and in much trembling. My speech and my preaching were not in persuasive words of human wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power, that your faith wouldn't stand in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. We speak wisdom, however, among those who are full grown, yet a wisdom not of this world, nor of the rulers of this world who are coming to nothing. But we speak God's wisdom in a mystery, the wisdom that has been hidden, which God foreordained before the worlds for our glory, which none of the rulers of this world has known. For had they known it, they wouldn't have crucified the Lord of glory. But as it is written, things which an eye didn't see, and an ear didn't hear, which didn't enter into the heart of man, these God has prepared for those who love Him. So Paul here is speaking to the Corinthian church, obviously, because all of 1 Corinthians is specifically for the Corinthian church. Paul helped establish that church back in Acts chapter 18. And because of where Corinth was, it was actually a really debaucherous place. It was a area right near the sea, so there was a lot of sailors that would come. There was a lot of tradesmen that would come. And they had a whole bunch of temples that were there where people could go and get a temple prostitute or something like that. And it was a very debaucherous place. So a lot of these things, unfortunately, are beginning to kind of make their way into the Corinthian church, and Paul hears about it. After he leaves to go on another missionary journey, he starts hearing all these reports, unfortunately, about what is going on in the Corinthian church. So he's starting to get kind of concerned and upset, so that's why he writes this letter. So he says, when I came to you, brothers, meaning when he came to Corinth originally and helped found that church, he says, I didn't come with excellence of speech or of wisdom, proclaiming to you the testimony of God. For I determined not to know anything among you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. So Paul says, look, when I first came to Corinth, I did not come to you as this educated philosopher. I came to you as an ordinary citizen, and I determined not to know anything among you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. So he's like, look, I just came as a witness. That is what I did when I came to Corinth. I did not act like I had all the knowledge. I did not act like I was a philosopher. In fact, I decided that I was going to be an ordinary person that just preaches about Christ being crucified. And that's exactly what Paul did. Once again, if you read the chapter of Acts 18, you'll see that when Paul went to Corinth, he went as a tent maker because that was his trade. Other than being a missionary, he was a tent maker. And so he supported himself through the work of being a tent maker. And then on his time off, he would go to the temple or go to a house of meeting, and he would proclaim the gospel to people. And then in verse 3, he says, I was with you in weakness, in fear, and in much trembling. And you might be like, well, why does Paul say that he came in fear and trembling? Isn't that a sin? Well, it could be what Paul is talking about here is that he came in fear and trembling because he realized how important it was to preach the gospel to the people of Corinth. So in a sense, he's saying, I had fear of God here, worried about doing the right thing, worried about preaching the gospel the right way. So he came in fear and trembling to Corinth. Now, it could also be that Paul is actually admitting a fault here. We do know that Paul did struggle with fear. There was a few times when he talks about that, where he specifically asks people to pray for him because he is afraid. There was another time where Jesus actually came to Paul and eased his fears and told Paul, don't be afraid. So Paul did struggle with fear, and it could be, Paul says, I came in weakness. I was afraid. I was in trembling when I came to you because I was truly afraid of persecution or the people of Corinth or something along those lines. So either this is Paul admitting a fault and humbling himself, admitting that he had that particular sin of fear, or he is saying that he came in fear and trembling of making sure that he really spread the gospel the right way. He says, my speech and my preaching were not in persuasive words of human wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power, that your faith wouldn't stand in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. So now Paul gets to the point of why he is talking about this, why he is saying, when I came to you guys, I did not come as this great philosopher or something like that. I did not come in human wisdom. And his point boils down to, the gospel message is not from human wisdom. It is from the power of God, is what he says here. That your faith wouldn't stand in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. Paul did not want the people of Corinth to put their faith in anything that was not the gospel message, and anything that was not the wisdom from God. And so that is why Paul came to Corinth, not to debate, not to argue with all these fancy words, but he came as a simple Jewish man, a simple tent maker, who wanted to witness about the gospel message and about the power of God. But then it's really funny here in verse 6, he kind of circles back around and he's like, well, don't get me wrong, guys. I'm not saying that the gospel message is not wise. Here's what he says. We speak wisdom, however, among those who are full grown, yet a wisdom not of this world, nor of the rulers of this world who are coming to nothing. So he's like, yeah, don't misunderstand what I'm saying here, that the gospel message is not wise. In fact, it is way wiser than any human wisdom at all. Because Paul does not want people to misunderstand what he's saying, because in the last chapter, right, which we read on Tuesday and last Thursday, we discussed how Paul was basically saying that the gospel message is like foolishness to people who refuse to listen to it. And then in this chapter, he's saying he did not come as this wise philosopher. And he's like, I don't want anybody to misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not saying the gospel message is not wise. In fact, it is extremely wise because it is the wisdom from God, not the wisdom from human beings. And then obviously any wisdom from God is going to be way above any human wisdom at all, which is kind of what he's getting at. He says, it's a wisdom not of this world, nor of the rulers of this world who are coming to nothing. So the smartest people, the wisdom of the smartest people on earth, who we typically think of as our rulers. And so Paul would be talking about not just like kings or the Caesar at this point in time. He would also be talking about the Pharisees and the rulers of the Jewish temple. He'd be talking about all the different kinds of rulers that the earth has, who rely on human wisdom. Those rulers, Paul says, are coming to nothing. They are coming to nothing because they refuse to believe in the true wisdom, not the human wisdom, but the true wisdom that comes from God, which is the message of the gospel. He says, we speak wisdom, however, among those who are full grown, meaning the Christians who accept and hear the message of the gospel. To any Christian listening, The gospel message is truly wisdom. In fact, there's a verse that says, fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And what is the gospel message other than teaching people to have fear of God, teaching people to have awe and reverence for God? That is the gospel message. And when we start developing that fear for God, we begin to gain true wisdom. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So to anybody who accepts the message of the gospel, they are becoming more wise. Verse 7, but we speak God's wisdom in a mystery, the wisdom that has been hidden, which God foreordained before the worlds for our glory. It's a really nice verse. The gospel message, Paul says, is for our glory. Glory means great honor. The gospel message is great honor to us because Jesus ultimately is the one who is truly glorified, truly honored. And he actually shares some of that honor with us. We share in Jesus's glory. In fact, later on in verse 8 here, Paul actually calls Jesus the Lord of glory. And that is who Jesus is. He is the Lord of glory. And he gives us that glory as well. But moving back to Paul's original point in verse 7, he says, but we speak God's wisdom in a mystery, the wisdom that has been hidden, which God foreordained before the worlds for our glory. So God, who is outside of time, because God created time, so he cannot be constrained by the rules of time. He is outside of time, which means that God can see everything. So God actually foreordained this knowledge before the world even began. God knew exactly what was going to happen when he created the earth. He knew that people would fall. He knew that Jesus would come down to earth. He knew about all of these mysteries, and he foreordained that before he even created the earth, which he has now made known to his people. He says, but none of the rulers of this world knew about it, because if they had known about it, they wouldn't have crucified the Lord of glory. Now, I take this verse to mean that if Satan, who is considered the prince of this world, the ruler of this world, if Satan had known about this mystery, he never would have tried to get Jesus crucified. The only reason Satan wanted to influence Judas to crucify Jesus was because Satan thought that he would win by killing Jesus. But Satan didn't understand this mystery that God had, that Jesus was going to defeat death and become this perfect sacrifice for humanity and take away the sins of the world through his sacrifice. Satan didn't understand all of that. He just wanted Jesus to die because he wanted to win. From the very beginning, Satan has been prideful, and he has wanted the authority that God has, and he wants worshipers. So that is why he was in the Garden of Eden, and he tempted Eve to eat that fruit and to disobey God and to cause sin to enter into the world. Satan wanted all that because Satan then thought that he would get that authority that he always wanted by getting these worshipers. But then Jesus posed a problem for Satan, right, when he came down to earth. So Satan thought it would be a good idea to kill Jesus, not understanding the mystery that Paul is talking about here. So then Satan influences Judas to get the religious leaders to crucify Jesus. And it works. Jesus goes up on the cross, but then Jesus becomes the perfect sacrifice for humanity. And in doing so, he offers this freedom from bondage that Satan helped put everybody in. And Satan was never going to release anybody. Satan was never going to offer freedom, obviously. Satan wanted that authority. He wanted those worshipers. So Jesus, through his sacrifice, ends up offering that freedom to the entire world and taking that authority away from Satan. So Satan loses. Satan lost all of that authority that he tried so hard to gain. And nowadays, Satan is doing his best to maintain that authority, of course, but Jesus has ultimately won, and Satan knows that. He knows that his time is drawing near. But obviously, had Satan truly understood this mystery from God, like I said, he would not have tried to crucify Jesus, because he would have known that Jesus was going to become the perfect sacrifice for the entire world and release people from what Satan helped do to them. So that's sort of the gospel message in a nutshell. But Paul says here, as it is written, things which an eye didn't see and an ear didn't hear, which didn't enter into the heart of man, these God has prepared for those who love him. And that is a paraphrase Paul states from Isaiah 64:4. So let's go over to that verse real quick. Isaiah 64:4 says, "For from of old men have not heard, nor perceived by the ear, nor has the eye seen a God besides you, who works for him who waits for him." So Paul's using this Old Testament reference to state that this mystery now has been revealed. This wonderful mystery that God kept hidden for so long has been revealed in Jesus. And now each and every person who accepts the gospel message is going to understand this really lofty wisdom from God that only God knew about and then chose to reveal to the whole world. So us Christians are blessed with wisdom that unbelievers just can't possibly attain. Something really interesting happened to me while I was recording this episode. This has only happened to me maybe 2 or 3 times throughout the 4 years of me doing this podcast. But when I was talking about the portion with Satan here in this episode, I got this overwhelming sense of fear and this weird feeling like someone was watching me, which is weird because there's nobody here. I'm the only one at home right now. My husband's at work. Bandit's actually in the other room, and nobody was watching me. I absolutely know that there are certain things that Satan just does not want me to say. That being said, I prayed to God, that creepy feeling went away, that fear went away, and I finished up the episode. But that tells me that this episode is extremely important and that there's someone out there that really needs to hear the message of the gospel. Well, anyway, faithful listeners, I hope that this episode was meaningful to you and that maybe you thought about the gospel message in a different light. And if you did, share it on your social media platforms or share it to somebody who you think might need it. All right, guys, I will see you all tomorrow as we finish up the very last episode of Season 7. Don't forget that next week there will not be a podcast episode because I'm going to take some time making sure that everything is good to go for Season 8. So I'll see you on Labor Day. Okay, that is when Season 8 is going to kick off, is September 2nd. But anyway, faithful listeners, have a fantastic and wonderful rest of your day. I'll see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning. Happy listening, and God bless.